Well, joining me live now is Liberal MP Jason Falinski. Jason, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. I just want to ask you about these job figures that are going to be coming out in a couple of hours' time. It's not going to be good. What's your view of how that may work out to be?
I think that everyone pretty much accepts that the effective rate of unemployment at the moment in Australia is about 13%. What these figures will probably show is that we'll move closer to that figure as we, when they're released. So, yeah, they're not going to be good.
No, and does that, I don't think that includes underemployment as well. So it may well be much higher than that, wouldn't it?
Well, underemployment in Australia, this is one of those sort of silly arguments that economists have about unemployment and underemployment and how high you can get the figure. The fact of the matter is, I know as you appreciate, Pete, these are real people behind these figures. So whether the figure is 13% or closer to 20%, the real fact of the matter is that the government is focused on, making sure that while people are unemployed, that they're in the best position they can be, that when the economy comes back for them to find jobs.
So on that, where is the positivity here?
What's positive out of these figures? Well, the answer to that question is not much, to be blunt with you. They're not surprising when you close more than half your economy due to a health crisis. These are the sorts of results that you end up looking at seeing in the economy. The real question for us as a community, not just as a government, is how we recover from this position as quickly as possible. That's what today's announcement on skills is all about. That's what the announcement on tomorrow will be about as well.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you that. Surely that's going to help this job trainer program, some $2.5 billion in total. It needs the support of the states. Anastasia Palaszczuk on the show a short time ago, she said she's going to support it. So it seems like this is going to be accepted by everyone.
Well, that's really good news. I mean, what we've seen is on a per capita basis, a 25% reduction in allocation of funding for people in the vet sector. So this is, really critical that we get vocational training back to where it should be. Most of those cuts have come from states, and I don't want to point my finger at any one in particular, but as the Commonwealth came in to fund more and more, the states took the opportunity to withdraw funding. The critical part of this, though, is that if we're going to get out of this, we have to get out of it together. There needs to be a shared sense of both sacrifice and responsibility and accountability for this. So that's great to hear that Queensland's on board.
Well, Tanya Plibersek, I noticed she's been tweeting this morning before the Twitter ban has come into play, of course, that for months that she'd been urging the Prime Minister to do something about it, has accused the government of being slow. What's your view of that?
It's disappointing that Tanya wants to be political about this, to be honest. This isn't a problem that occurred before the pandemic. This is a problem that has been going on for more than a decade and a half. It is probably, if you wanted to be political, you could say, well, what was happening under the Rudd-Gillard government? I don't think now is the time for those sorts of arguments. Now is the time to say we understand what the challenge is. We all need to take accountability for it, and we all need to be responsible for the solutions.
As a Sydney sider, Jason, how concerned or alarmed are you at the spread now? It seems to be, of coronavirus I'm talking about here, it seems to be following that dangerous trend.
I thought you were talking about AFL teams to Queensland.
We'll get to that in a second, but, it starts at 2, and then it goes to 9, then it's 20, then it's 30.
Before you know, you've got 10 on your doorstep.
Absolutely, yeah. So how concerned are you about this spread?
Look, I'm very concerned about it. Obviously, as the Premier Gladys has been making very clear in New South Wales, we don't want to go through a process of locking down, then opening up, then locking down again. So it's critical that we make sure that the spread is contained as much as possible. Health experts globally have been saying, look, this virus is going to be with us for quite some time. So I think that this is just a prelude for what is going to go on in our country and globally for some time, which is that you are going to have periodical outbreaks of this, and we need to have very good systems in place to make sure that we can be alerted to that as quickly as possible and close it down as quickly as possible.
And there is this hot debate that you're aware of at the moment, Jason, too, this elimination versus suppression debate. The PM said complete elimination is not possible. You'd have your unemployment rate that would effectively double. But I guess the Victorians weighed into this yesterday by saying that it should be considered. Maybe, we should at least be talking about whether it's possible. But, the Queensland Premier, again, who's been some of the toughest, she has some of the toughest laws in place, has said it's not possible. What's your
Pete,
view?
Well, can I tell you that all of the state governments pale into comparison to some of the measures that the Chinese government put in place, including the deployment of drones to make sure that people weren't leaving home. And they've had further outbreaks in cities like Beijing, for example. So this idea that there's a choice between containment and elimination, the evidence globally is that that's just not the case. And as the Prime Minister correctly points out, the economic damage of attempting to eliminate a virus, which you will inevitably fail to do, is just so great. I think that we need to actually be a lot more sensible about this.
Well, I mean, let's say, theoretically, you do get to zero cases, but then, there might be a person who comes on a ship who's been trading goods or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's off and running again. So it's all been for nothing.
Yeah, look, I mean, Beijing had, I could be wrong on this, but I think it had about 3 weeks of zero infections. So they got through that 14-day period. And then about a week after that, they started getting rapid increases in the virus.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't kept in touch to find out if they've located where that originated from, but that's the tricky thing about this virus, that people can be spreading it while still being asymptomatic. So it's just, I mean, I really would caution people who are saying things like, oh, we should go for elimination, that number one, Australia can't act on its own in a global environment where we are so globally connected. And secondly, we can't hold out false hope. I mean, if we could, we would, but the damage that you would be doing both to ordinary people, hardworking Australians who have got their lives on the line, would just be so enormous. I would caution people especially people in places of public responsibility, from holding out that hope.
Okay, just finally, AFL Grand Final at the Gabba. Would you support that?
But if it moves it away from Melbourne, this is going to get me in trouble. If it moves away from Melbourne, I think it would be good,
Well, I mean, the Premier makes a good point. She's doing the heavy lifting. Queensland's doing the heavy lifting to save the AFL season. Why not, as a quid pro quo, give her the grand final?
Well, look, have you noticed how all the state premiers are doing the heavy lifting?
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to be a sensible thing to do. I could make a lot of comments here which will ensure that I lose all my friends in Melbourne, so I think I'll just leave it there.
Well, I mean, Peter V'landys is knocking on Anastasia Palaszczuk's door as well, so she's very much in demand at the moment, Anastasia Palaszczuk, no doubt about that. Yeah.
I don't want to say anything.
Okay, you're not going there. All right, Jason Falinski, thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Peter.
Chat to you again soon.
Nice to hear from you. See you.
All right, another 85 people have died